The persecution of our comrades has been a source of growth for the gangs, and they've grabbed us even more. So this week, in a month, there are 10 new ones. They bring in the father, the son remains the brother. When they grow up, the grandson comes. This man feared nothing and was so macabre that he was even compared to Old Lin himself. However, a simple mistake caused his entire empire of terror to fall to pieces. What was the day of his capture like? Stay until the end of the video and find out. William Wilfredo Muñoz Alfaro, known in criminal circles as L/, emerged as a prominent name in the gang network of Barrio 18 in El Salvador. His recent capture in Guatemala has highlighted the challenges and complexities of the fight against transnational organized crime in Central America. Barrio 18, known for its ruthless violence and extortion, has been a persistent presence in the social and political dynamics of El Salvador. Muñoz Alfaro, 40, was not a simple member of La Pandilla, but held a leadership role within a clique in Barrio 18. His influence extended beyond the streets and neighborhoods where he operated, even establishing connections with other organized crime leaders in the region. Muñoz had been evading Salvadoran authorities for several days, seeking refuge in Guatemala. His strategy of hiding in the Lomas del Eden neighborhood in Zone 5 of the Guatemalan capital was carefully planned with the help of other imprisoned gang members and leaders for Barrio 18, such as Aldo Ochoa Mejia, known as El Lobo, and Rudy Francisco, nicknamed El Smuff, according to Orozco. These individuals, despite being behind bars in Guatemala, maintained a network of criminals, of communication that facilitated the mobility and protection of key figures such as Muñoz Alfaro. The capture of Slash not only represents a significant blow to the Barrio 18 command structure in El Salvador, but also underscores the complexity of police and intelligence work in the region. Guatemalan authorities, in collaboration with the Public Prosecutor's Office and the National Civil Police, deployed a meticulous operation to secure Muñoz Alfaro and dismantle any support network that could facilitate his illegal stay in the country. Upon his capture, Muñoz Alfaro claimed that he had arrived in Guatemala in December of the previous year, but denied that he was fleeing justice. In his defense, he argued that he was seeking rehabilitation and distancing himself from the criminal lifestyle that characterizes gangs. However, authorities, based on investigations and collected testimonies, indicate that his presence in Guatemala was directly linked to criminal activities and the continued influence within the gang. The impact of figures like Slash is not limited solely to the sphere of organized crime. His capture has provoked reactions in political and social sectors, generating debates on security and migration policies in both countries. Surveillance and cross-border cooperation have become key elements in confronting the challenge posed by gangs, whose capacity for adaptation and mobilization constantly challenges the resources and strategies of the authorities. Muñoz Alfaro's presence in Guatemala under an alias that reflects his intimidating role and reputation within the gang highlights the interconnectedness of security problems in the Central American region. Gangs like Barrio 18 and Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13 operate beyond national borders, taking advantage of informal networks and weak justice systems to expand their influence and criminal activity. On the day of his capture, and in his final words, the Guatemalan authorities have been closing they surrounded him for days, coordinating a meticulous operation to ensure his capture. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Muñoz Alfaro became alert. His heart pounded as he anticipated the inevitable. The door suddenly opened, revealing a tactical team of civilian national police officers in dark uniforms and serious faces. Among them was an officer with a firm gaze and an authoritative voice. He stepped forward, pointing a gun at him while the others secured the room. William Wilfredo Muñoz Alfaro, alias L/, announced. The officer, in turn, echoed in the small space. You are under arrest on charges of criminal association and other offenses related to criminal activity in El Salvador. Muñoz Alfaro raised his hands in a gesture of resignation, his expression impassive despite the whirlwind of thoughts that invaded him. He knew that this day would come sooner or later. He carefully stood up, facing the reality of his capture with the same calm he had displayed for years on the streets dominated by the Barrio 18 neighborhood. While he was handcuffed and escorted out of the building, curious neighbors poked their heads out the windows, opened their eyes, silently observing the spectacle unfolding in front of them. Some murmured among themselves, recognizing L/ as a feared but respected figure in the dark world of gangs. On the way to the police station, Muñoz Alfaro was interrogated by the officers accompanying him. He responded cautiously, not revealing too much, but without denying his identity or his connections within Barrio 18. "I've been here since December," he murmured in response to a question about his presence in Guatemala. "I wasn't fleeing. I was just looking to rehabilitate myself," he added, trying to mitigate the seriousness of the accusations against him. For the authorities, L/'s capture represented a significant victory in the fight against transnational organized crime. However, for Muñoz Alfaro, it was the end of an era marked by violence and loyalty to a cause that now seemed distant and blurred in the police station while he was being processed. News of his capture spread. Headlines in local newspapers and television news broadcasts quickly spread, highlighting the successful operation and the prominent figure who had been taken into custody. On social media, divided comments reflected conflicting opinions about his legacy and the effectiveness of police strategies. For Muñoz Alfaro, the cold and austere cell became his new temporary home. He reflected on the twists and turns his life had taken, from the turbulent days in El Salvador to the uncertainty of his future behind bars. The words of his lawyers echoed in his mind, promising to fight for his rights and explore possible legal avenues for his defense. The arrest process not only captured Muñoz Alfaro, but also revealed the presence of two other figures linked to Mara 18 in the same raid. Maria de Los Angeles Perez Garcia, known as La Mar Nubia, Leticia Salazar Morales. Nicknamed La, they were arrested in connection with illicit activities involving everything from drug promotion to criminal association. Their arrests underscored the complexity of criminal networks operating in the shadows of Central American cities, where gang loyalty often mingles with desperation and survival. The streets of San Salvador, where he had exerted influence as the leader of a Barrio 18 clique, did not offer the refuge or opportunity for change he had hoped to find on his foray into the neighboring country. His connections with El Lobo and Smurfs, imprisoned leaders of the Barrio 18 in Guatemala, were revealed as an effort to ensure his protection and continue to exert influence from the shadows. Slash's rise in luxury was power, and his ability to turn criminal profits into a personal fortune was a manifestation of his cunning and determination. Income obtained through extortion, drug trafficking, and other illicit activities was cleverly channeled into cryptocurrency investments. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other digital currencies not only offered a safe haven for his earnings, but also a platform for discrete international transactions and the purchase of goods that could not be obtained legally. On the outskirts of the city, the Slash lived surrounded by luxury and security. His estates, strategically scattered throughout the region, not only served as refuges away from the prying eyes of authorities, but also as logistics centers for his operations. Armed guards patrolled the grounds while cutting-edge technology protected his assets. Every detail of his life inside the mansion reflected his position of power. Lavish furniture imported from Europe, expensive artwork adorned the walls, and a collection of luxury cars parked in an underground garage were silent witnesses to his success in the criminal underworld, from Italian sports cars to armored SUVs. Each vehicle was more than just a means of transportation. It was a declaration of his wealth and his ability to manage risk and opulence with equal skill. But beyond material goods, Slash distinguished himself by his ability to move in underground financial circles. Cryptocurrencies provided him with a powerful tool to diversify and protect his wealth, allowing him to access global arms markets and other illegal resources through platforms on the dark web. He negotiated with anonymous suppliers to acquire everything from firearms to advanced communications technology, thus ensuring his dominance over disputed territories and securing his position as a feared and respected leader within the gang. By the way, If you're enjoying the video, we invite you to give us your like and activate the notification bell to receive notifications. Don't miss any of our videos. We continue our foray into the web world. His first contact with cryptocurrencies was casual, but revealing during a police raid in which authorities seized traditional assets from the Slash gang and his associates. He began exploring financial alternatives that would allow him to move money without detection. It was then that he stumbled upon Bitcoin and other emerging cryptocurrencies. At the time, the idea of using cryptocurrencies for money laundering and financing illicit operations seemed too risky and complicated. However, Slash was known for his cunning and audacity. He immersed himself in the world of cryptocurrencies, learning about their technical operation and the possibilities they offered for conducting transactions beyond the reach of authorities. Over time, Slash built a clandestine cryptocurrency network that became a financial backbone for his Barrio 18 faction. He used decentralized exchanges and cryptocurrency mixing services to hide the origin and destination of the funds, ensuring that each transaction appeared legitimate in the eyes of those monitoring his activities. His ability to adapt to new technologies and his vision for the future made him an even more powerful leader within the gang. Not only could he move money seamlessly across borders, but he could also finance weapons purchases and maintain a robust operational structure without relying entirely on physical cash, which was increasingly difficult to manage due to police pressure. In addition to his criminal activities, Slash began investing part of his profits in legitimate cryptocurrency projects, leveraging his market knowledge and connections to make additional profits. His prudent and timely investments in ICOs, initial coin offerings, and emerging projects provided him with additional income, which he used to further expand his influence and power in the world of organized crime. As his reputation grew in the criminal underworld, Slash became more cautious and secretive. The importance of maintaining a low profile online and offline used advanced online anonymity techniques and cybersecurity measures to protect their communications and operations, thus avoiding being tracked by authorities or rivals within the gangs. The MIA-18 gang began in the 1960s in Los Angeles, California, United States, as a response by Hispanic youth to discrimination and violence in their communities. MARA-18 eventually expanded to other Central American countries, including El Salvador, where it became one of the most powerful and feared gangs in the country. Drug trafficking in MARA-18 and other gangs in the region has its roots in the 1980s, when the United States intensified its war on drugs and began implementing stricter policies on the border with Mexico. This led to an increase in trafficking of drugs through alternative routes, including those through Central America. In this context, MARA-18 and other gangs saw an opportunity to gain power and resources through drug trafficking. They began collaborating with Mexican and Colombian drug cartels to transport and distribute drugs in the region. The money obtained from drug trafficking allowed the gangs to expand their territorial control and strengthen their power. The influence of Old Man Lin. Old Man Lin and his gang became involved in activities such as cocaine and heroin smuggling, arms trafficking, and extortion. They controlled much of the illegal trafficking in El Salvador and maintained a hierarchical and disciplinary structure within the gang. Those who challenged his authority or attempted to betray him were punished with extreme violence, which contributed to his reputation as a ruthless leader as drug trafficking became a source of income. An important source of income for MARA-18, the gang expanded and diversified its operations. They established enclaves in marginal neighborhoods and urban areas where they controlled drug sales and extorted residents. Viejo Lin and his gang became a force to be reckoned with in El Salvador's criminal world, challenging the authority of the government and the law. One of Viejo Lin's key strategies was to establish alliances with Mexican and Colombian drug cartels. These alliances gave him access to large quantities of drugs, primarily cocaine and heroin, which he then distributed in El Salvador and other Central American countries. Viejo Lin and his gang were responsible for transporting the drugs through clandestine routes, avoiding detection by the authorities to ensure the success of their operations. Viejo Lin and Mara 18 used violent methods to maintain control over the gang. The trafficking routes and distribution points used intimidation, extortion, and physical violence to eliminate competition and ensure that no one interfered with their activities. Those who attempted to challenge their authority or compete with them were punished with extreme violence, which allowed them to maintain their control over the drug trafficking business. In addition to using violence to maintain their control, Viejo Lin and Mara 18 also developed a network of informants and collaborators who provided them with information about the movements of the authorities and potential threats to their operations. This intelligence network allowed them to anticipate and neutralize any attempt at intervention by the authorities or other rival gangs. The arrival of fentanyl. The introduction of fentanyl into Central America occurred at a time when gangs like MS-13 and MAR-18 were seeking to expand their drug trafficking operations and diversify. Its product portfolio, fentanyl, being much more potent and cheaper to produce than fentanyl and other opiate drugs, became an attractive option for these gangs. However, the arrival of fentanyl also brought with it a series of problems and challenges. First, its potency made it much more dangerous for users, as even a small amount could cause a fatal overdose. This led to an increase in overdose deaths in the region, raising concerns among authorities and society at large. Furthermore, fentanyl began to have an impact on the most vulnerable communities in Central America. The gangs that controlled much of the drug trafficking and distribution in the region began to use fentanyl as a tool to exert control over the population and increase their profits. Fentanyl and Old Lin. The distribution of fentanyl by gangs had an immediate impact on local communities. The drug's lethality led to an increase in overdose deaths in many parts of Central America, which generated alarm and concern in society and among authorities. Furthermore, the presence of fentanyl in the communities also led to an increase in violence and insecurity as gangs fought to control the lucrative drug market. However, in the face of this great rivalry, Old Man Lin had a plan that would change the game. Completely brothers, Old Man Lin began, in his deep, authoritative voice. We have been operating the same way for too long. It's time to diversify our business and increase our profits. The gang leaders listened attentively, intrigued by what Old Man Lin had in mind. He continued, I have obtained a new drug that is causing a sensation in other places. It's called fentanyl, and it's much more potent and profitable than anything we've sold before. The gang leaders looked at each other, captivated by the idea of a new drug that could increase their profits. However, none of them knew that fentanyl was extremely potent and dangerous, and that a small amount could be fatal. Old Lin proceeded to establish contacts abroad to obtain a large quantity of fentanyl and began distributing it on the streets of San Salvador through gang networks. The drug quickly gained popularity among addicts due to its potency and low cost. However, as fentanyl spread through the streets, problems began to arise. Hospitals were overwhelmed by an increase in overdose cases, and morgues were filled with bodies of people who had died from using the drug. Despite the devastating consequences fentanyl was having on the community, Old Lin decided to continue distributing it, both locally and internationally. For him, fentanyl represented a unique opportunity to expand his criminal empire and increase his profits despite the human cost. Old Man Lin had established a well-organized distribution network spanning several countries in Central and North America. Despite efforts by authorities to halt fentanyl trafficking, Old Man Lin and his associates managed to evade controls and continue distributing the drug in large quantities. Locally, fentanyl had become the best-selling drug on the streets, surpassing cocaine and heroin in popularity. Its potency and low cost made it irresistible to many addicts despite the deadly risks involved in its use. Internationally, Old Man Lin had established alliances with drug cartels in Mexico and Colombia to expand fentanyl distribution to other countries in Latin America and the United States. This allowed him to access new markets and further increase his presence. Their profits continued despite growing pressure from international authorities to halt drug trafficking. As fentanyl continued to wreak havoc in the communities where it was distributed, outrage grew, as did demands for stronger measures to stop its distribution. Authorities intensified their efforts to combat drug trafficking, leading to increasingly violent clashes between gangs and law enforcement. The worst tragedy caused by Old Lynn occurred in a small rural community in Central America. Fentanyl had arrived in the region through gang distribution networks and quickly became the most widely used drug in the area due to its potency and low cost. One day, a group of young people from the community decided to experiment with fentanyl, unaware of how dangerous the drug was. They bought a dose and consumed it together, hoping to experience a high similar to that of other, more common drugs. However, what followed was an unimaginable tragedy. Shortly after using the drug, one of the young men began to convulse and had difficulty breathing. The others tried to help him, but quickly realized something was terribly wrong. They called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. The young man had died of a fentanyl overdose. News of the young man's death quickly spread through the community, causing shock and dismay among residents. Many of them knew the young man and his family, which made the tragedy even more painful. The young man's parents, devastated by the loss of their son, demanded answers and justice. Local authorities launched an investigation and soon discovered that the fentanyl had been distributed by local gangs led by the young man. Old Lynn unleashed a wave of outrage against the gangs, with the community demanding an end to drug distribution. With Old Lynn's downfall, authorities have been investigating his activities for months, gathering evidence and information about his fentanyl distribution network. Finally, authorities gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant against Old Lynn. They knew capturing him would not be easy, as he was a cunning and experienced man in the world of organized crime. However, they were determined to bring him to justice for the crimes he had committed. The operation to capture Old Lynn began in the early hours of the morning when a team of special police forces deployed to his known hideout on the outskirts of town. Using accurate intelligence, they surrounded the property and took action. Old Lynn and his bodyguards tried to resist, but were soon overwhelmed by the strength and number of police forces. After a brief but intense confrontation, Old Lynn was finally captured and handcuffed. News of Old Lynn's capture spread quickly throughout the region, causing shock and relief among the population. He was held responsible for countless deaths and tragedies caused by the distribution of fentanyl. His capture was hailed as an important step in the fight against drug trafficking in the region. Old Lynn was brought to justice and faced multiple charges related to drug trafficking and the distribution of fentanyl. During the trial, shocking details about his criminal activities were revealed, further increasing public outrage against him. Old Lynn was finally sentenced to life in prison for his crimes. And so we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us a like so we can continue making more videos like this. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day. See you next time.